Good evening, residents of Everett, Washington. I would like to call to order the Everett City Council meeting of November 10th, 2021. In accordance with the Governor's Healthy Washington guidelines and in an effort to protect city employees and members of the public from transmission of COVID-19, the City Council is conducting our weekly council meeting remotely. We are prepared to reopen the council chambers to public meetings when public health considerations indicate it is safe to do so. There are several ways in which you can engage with the council and participate in our meetings. To watch or participate in our remote meetings, you may watch council meetings live on Comcast Channel 21 or Frontier Channel 29. You may watch live online at www.everettwa.gov/citycouncil, where you may also watch past meetings. You may also call in to listen to the live meeting at any point by dialing 1-425-616-3920, conference ID number 724-887-726#. You may find the public comment registration form on the City of Everett website under the City Council Department. Once you go to register here to provide comment via Zoom, you'll need to fill the form out completely if you wish to provide public comment at a future meeting. After the public comment form is submitted, you will receive an email confirmation with a Zoom link and the phone number to the meeting. Participants must submit this form at least 30 minutes prior to the meeting. Forms submitted after that time will not receive the Zoom link number to speak, but may still participate the day of the meeting by submitting comments in writing to council@everettwa.gov. For assistance, contact the council office at 425-257-8703 or email Deb Williams at dwilliams@everettwa.gov. Please note that we do not allow comments on any kind of campaigning, whether for or against ballot measures or candidates running for office. We also do not accept comments focused on personal matters that are unrelated to city business. Outside of our meetings, members of the public are always welcome to contact council members or provide comments or concerns on any matter via email at council@everettwa.gov or by calling the City Council office at 425-257-8703. At this point, Clerk, would you please take the roll?
President Stonecipher?
Excused.
Councilmember Toohey?
Excused.
Councilmember Moore?
Excused.
Councilmember Murphy?
I'm here.
Councilmember Roberts?
Here.
Councilmember Vogely?
Here.
Councilmember Bader?
Here. All right, thank you.
And I'm sorry, this is Mayor Cassie Franklin. I am also here. You didn't call on my name. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Mayor. Okay, we'd like to call on Councilmember Murphy to read the land acknowledgement.
Thank you, Council President. The City Council wishes to acknowledge the original inhabitants of this place, the Stohoche people, and their successors, the Tulalip tribes. Since time immemorial, they have hunted, fished, gathered on, and taken care of these lands and waters. We respect their sovereignty, their right to self-determination, and honor their sacred spiritual connection with the land and water. We will strive to be honest about past mistakes and bring about a future that includes their people, stories, and voices to ensure a more just and equitable society. Thank you.
Oops. Thank you, Councilmember Murphy. Councilmember Roberts, if you could lead us in the pledge, please.
Thank you. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Councilmember Roberts. Do I have a motion for the approval of the minutes of November 3rd, 2021?
Roberts, so moves.
Vogely seconds.
Thank you, Councilmembers Roberts and Vogely. Clerk, please take the roll on the approval of the minutes.
Councilmember Murphy?
Abstain?
Councilmember Roberts?
Yes.
Councilmember Vogely?
Yes.
Councilmember Bader?
Yes, and just to clarify, Mr. City Attorney, on this matter, majority of the quorum, even though it's not a majority of the council, is sufficient, correct?
Absolutely correct.
Thank you. Okay. Thank you. Moving on to Mayor Franklin.
Thanks, Councilmember Bader. I have just a few things tonight. First, Happy Veterans Day and a thank you to all our servicemen and women for your service to our country. We appreciate you and wish you a happy Veterans Day. Second, our boards and commissions are currently accepting applications. I've shared this as far as wide as we can, but I encourage all of you to check our city website to our public and please apply. We have multiple openings, so hopefully we'll get a lot of engagement with our boards and commissions. And third, I'm sure many of you read in the Herald this week about the county's interest in buying a hotel in Everett to serve homeless populations. We've been working closely with other jurisdictions to advocate to the county for solutions and support to address the growing crisis of chronic homelessness, especially in Everett, but across our entire county. As we've been in discussions with the county, I've expressed both the urgency of the situation in Everett, but also the importance that any program that is centered in Everett serves Everett rather than serving a countywide population. And as I understand, the county is working very closely with other jurisdictions on solutions in their jurisdictions as well. I know the county is looking at a few properties. As I understand, the properties that they're looking at in Everett are zoned mixed use. And as I understand, within that zone, housing and shelter are appropriate for that use. Of course, once they finalize a location and formalize an offer on a property, they'll have to work closely with planning and go through any traditional review process as necessary, depending on where the property is. And we'll look forward to working with all of you on that. And then the last thing, I would like to invite Chief Templeman forward to swear in 2 new officers. I'm very excited as I see one officer is female. I'm excited for both officers, but I'm always happy to welcome more women to the department. And so welcome, Chief Templeman.
Great. Thank you very much, Mayor Franklin, and good evening, council members. Dan Templeman with the Police Department, and I am happy tonight to introduce to you our 2 newest Everett police officers. And I'd like to start with Devona Heyward. Devona was born and raised in South Carolina, where she comes from a large church family. Her father is a bishop and her mother is a church missionary. Devona graduated from Carolina Theological Bible Institute with a bachelor's degree and a master's degree in Christian theology and counseling. In 2018, Devona started her law enforcement career with the Gifford Police Department as a patrol officer, then moved on to the Hampton County Sheriff's Office, where she worked as a school resource officer and in their warrants division. She also worked with the K-9 unit and the SWAT team during her time at the Sheriff's Office. In alignment with her strong faith, Devona finds the most enjoyable aspect of being a police officer is the opportunity it provides to be of service to others. When she decided to move to the West Coast, Devona chose the Everett Police Department because of the department's commitment to our core values of integrity, professionalism, and honor, which she feels are the very characteristics we as officers must embody and uphold in order to better the community we serve. In Devona's free time, she enjoys reading and doing anything outdoors. She's excited to start her career here at the Everett Police Department and would eventually like to work towards a position in our investigations division to pursue her interest in forensics. Thanks, Devona. And next, I'd like to introduce Jeremy Fritsche. So Jeremy was born in Minnesota and grew up in Colorado. He has an Associates of Arts degree and is currently pursuing his bachelor's degree in English. Jeremy worked as a dispatcher in Black Hawk, Colorado, before he moved to Anchorage, Alaska, where he started his law enforcement career in 2013. Jeremy finds police work rewarding in that it affords him the opportunity to help people in their time of crisis and hopefully mitigate the effects of what is quite possibly the worst moment in somebody's life. During his time at the Anchorage Police Department, Jeremy worked as a crisis intervention team officer, as well as a member of the crisis negotiation team. He also served as a field training officer on patrol before he was promoted to sergeant in 2020. When moving to Washington, Jeremy chose Everett over several other agencies for many reasons, but one of the biggest factors was how officers conducted themselves during calls when he was here for his ride-along. Additionally, He also had an insider here, which was another Anchorage lateral officer that we hired recently. And that other lateral officer gave him some valuable insight and spoke highly of our department. Also joining the EPD family is Jeremy's wife of 9 years, Karen. During their spare time, the two enjoy traveling, hiking, and doing things like skydiving. Jeremy looks forward to continuing his law enforcement career here in Everett. And we welcome Jeremy. Thank you, Jeremy. And so I present to City Council our two newest lateral police officers for swearing in. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief Templeman. Do I have a motion for one of my colleagues to accept Devona Heyward and Jeremy Fritsche as the newest members of the Everett Police Department?
I would be honored to make that motion, Mr. President. Paul Roberts.
And Vogely will second it.
Thank you, Councilmembers Roberts and Vogely. Clerk, please take the roll.
Councilmember Murphy,
Yes.
Councilmember Roberts,
Yes.
Councilmember Vogely,
Yes.
and Councilmember Bader.
Thank you. Back to you, Clerk. For the oath.
Okay, so the oath of officers is, sorry. All right, so please raise your right hand and repeat after me. I, please state your name,
I, Devona Heyward,
do solemnly swear
do solemnly swear
that I am either a citizen of the United States
that I am either a citizen of the United States
or a lawful permanent resident,
or a lawful permanent resident,
that I will support the Constitution
that I will support the Constitution
of the United States,
of the United States,
the Constitution and laws of the state of Washington,
the Constitution and laws of the state of Washington,
and the charter and ordinances of the city of Everett,
and the charter and ordinances of the city of Everett,
and that I will faithfully, honestly,
honestly,
and impartially
and impartially
perform the duties of a police officer of the city of Everett,
perform the duties of a police officer of the city of Everett,
according to the best of my ability, so help me God.
according to the best of my ability, so help me God.
Congratulations, you guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Yes, welcome Officers Fritsche and Heyward, and thank you for choosing Everett. I'd like to give a quick opportunity for my colleagues to say a word of congratulations. Councilmember Murphy.
Thank you, Councilmember Bader. Yes, I'd just like to welcome you to the Everett Police Department, and it's great to have you aboard. Really appreciate hearing about your past experiences and skills, and I think you'll add a lot of value to our city. So thanks again for joining Everett.
Thanks, Councilmember Roberts.
Just wish to say welcome aboard. And I just think that Everett is really blessed with an outstanding department. And I'm really excited that we are adding two outstanding recruits to that. So welcome aboard.
Thank you.
Councilmember Vogely.
I will echo all of that. Thank you so much for being here and choosing Everett. I think you've made a wise choice.
And then
Thank you.
Mayor Franklin.
Yeah, thank you so much. We're so thrilled to welcome you on board to our team, and thank you for your willingness to serve our residents. And thank you, Councilmember Roberts. With that, I have no further comments tonight. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Mayor. All right, moving on to council comments and liaison reports. Councilmember Murphy.
Thank you, Councilmember Bader. No liaison report this evening, but I did want to comment on the homeless hotel that Mayor Franklin mentioned. I, of course, read the Herald yesterday, the Herald article about this proposal, and was somewhat surprised to hear that the county had moved so far down the tracks on this project. I think we've all worked very cooperatively and collaboratively with the county over the last few years to do a lot for our homeless population in Everett. And we know that that problem continues to be pervasive, but was surprised to read that the county had gone so far as to actually approve hiring the real estate people to purchase a hotel of 125 rooms. And this raises a number of questions that I think as policymakers, we should probably have some discussion about. Mayor, I understand you've been in discussions with the county and you may be privy to a lot of additional details to this as to how it might work. But again, I know that as a council member, I have a number of questions as to how this might work. What would be the impact on our city in terms of social services? What would be the impact on our police department? What would be the impact on our neighborhoods, wherever this might end up being sited? And I know that another concern would be just making sure that our public and our community have the opportunity to hear about this proposal and how it would be operated, what sorts of responsibilities the county would take on versus the city. And they obviously want to weigh in terms of where this might be located within the city limits. So I would like to see us schedule a briefing as soon as possible with the county and city staff that might be knowledgeable about this project, so that the city council might have an opportunity to hear more details about this project, and also have the opportunity to ask questions, and certainly have our public be able to weigh in as well. And again, I know that this is moving down the tracks very rapidly. And so what I would like to suggest at this point is that we end up, I think we should go back to the county and ask for them to pause this until such time as the city council, the Everett City Council, could have an opportunity to learn more about this project. And it was interesting. I went back today to the meeting of the Snohomish County Council on October 6th. And that was where the county council had a very in-depth discussion about the budget appropriation for this project. And there was an amendment brought forward by two of the county council members, specifically Councilmember Lowe and Councilmember Nearing, that would have required the city for this hotel, wherever the city hotel was targeted. And it's my understanding that Everett is the only city in the county that the county is actually looking at buying a hotel. There are other strategies that they plan to implement in other cities, but there was an amendment put forward on that October 6th meeting that would have required the city to step forward with a letter to the county requesting that the city be awarded this hotel project by the county. And that amendment came to a vote, and that vote was turned down 3-2, with council members Lowe and Nearing voting for it, and the other three council members voting against it. So really there was an opportunity brought forward at the county level for the city of Everett to have been able to weigh in earlier in this process. And unfortunately, that did not happen, because that amendment requiring the city to step forward with a policy direction asking that this project move forward, that did not occur. So now here we are a month or so later, and it sounds like the county's moving forward, at least in my mind, without getting clear direction from a policy perspective at the city as to whether this hotel would be a good idea, where it would be located, how it would operate. And so at this point, what I'd like to do is, again, I'd like to make a motion that I work with the city attorney over the next few days and bring something back at next week's meeting for the city council to consider. And that would be basically a communication to the county council asking them to pause this project until such time as a briefing could be hopefully very quickly set up for the city council in Everett to learn more about the project that the county's bringing forward. And so at this time, I would hope for a second to work with the city attorney to draft such a communication that we could bring back next week for the city council when our colleagues are back in attendance, and we could have a further discussion about it and decide whether or not that request to the county to pause this until we could get a briefing would be appropriate.
Thanks, Councilmember Murphy. Anybody second?
Oddly enough, I would second that.
Thanks, Councilmember Vogely. Assume that's what we're looking for. Councilmember Murphy, and maybe the administration might be bringing us a briefing anyway as well.
Well, I hope so, but I'd like to work with the city attorney on this, and Councilmember Vogely, I appreciate your second, and I'll reach out to you and work with you as well. And that's all I had this evening. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, moving on then to Councilmember Roberts.
Thanks, President Bader. I have just two items, I guess. First, I appreciate the recognition of Veterans Day as well for tomorrow, and wish our veterans the very best. Secondly, I attended the Riverside meeting last night. We had a lot of things to cover, and I think Councilmember Bader was there as well. And so we covered budget and comp plan, park fees, rethink housing, the American Rescue Plan Act. There was a discussion about the California Street Bicycle Plan and trying to get some graphics. I need to get a note to Ryan Sass on that so that we can get that information back to the Riverside neighborhood. And just a good discussion on a lot of topics. A very active discussion on what will be the bicycle connections and bicycle master plan that's likely to be, I hope will be embedded in our comprehensive plan update as we go forward. So that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Vogely.
Hello, and thank you very much. As I was listening to Councilmember Murphy, I just thought that those were quite a few good questions to be asked. I know that I am likely to want to accept a hotel, but yeah, I'm very interested in hearing more about it for sure. So I also was at the Westmont Holly Neighborhood Association meeting last night, and there was lively conversation there as well. And one question that came up was about the bicycle, not the California Street survey, but the one that has just closed about being awarded. I'm sorry that I cannot remember the exact name of the award, but we're going for at least bronze. And so they wanted to hear more about that. So if I can get information from whoever can give me that information, that would be great. I also mentioned boards and commissions at that meeting. So hopefully there will be a couple folks coming in. And went to the Everett Housing Authority board meeting. Allison Warren Barber is actually stepping down as of December. And I would like to read that. She had a forceful and effective leadership, instrumental change agent for the Everett Housing Authority's mission statement with a focus on systemic racism and equity. So I didn't get to say those words, but they were spoken about her. So thank you, Allison Warren Barber. And there were an election of officers. And so the new chair coming in will be Ben Young, and the vice chair will be Chip Burgess. And that is what I have today. Thank you.
Great, thank you. For my report, again, joining my colleagues in thanking our veterans as we approach Veterans Day tomorrow for their service and all they have done for us. My liaison report, Health District, Swinomish County Health District Board met yesterday afternoon. We were at a budget briefing from the executive officer of the Health District, and certainly a different year, even aside from the pandemic, because of the funds the legislature allocated for health districts going forward. So interesting times as we look to maximize use of those funds and expand some services, some needed services in all the areas, whether it's environmental health or fees and permits or infectious diseases, et cetera. So good, interesting news there. And then also the report of the health officer. A notable thing is he was starting to talk about what happens next as we move from pandemic to epidemic. So anyhow, if you have the opportunity to read or to go on and listen to that meeting, especially the health officer's report near the end, I think is very interesting to anyone who is curious about what happens next. I mean, nothing necessarily definitive, but kind of laying out what happens next. And obviously state health authorities play the major role in deciding what happens for us in Snohomish County and throughout the state, but still an intriguing presentation. With that, just quickly announce, due to unforeseen circumstances, just noting we'll leave the public hearing open on items 9 and 10. We'll announce this again when we get there, and these matters will be on November 17th, 2021 at 5:30, an early meeting for third and final reading in the council to take action. Let's see here. I think I skipped that. Then moving on to administration report, or report from administration.
No administrative update tonight.
Thank you, Lori. City Attorney.
Nothing to report tonight and no executive session. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, moving on to our consent items. Is there a motion for the consent items?
Roberts moves the consent items.
Murphy, second.
Thank you. Clerk, please take the roll on the 4 consent items.
Councilmember Murphy,
Yes.
Councilmember Roberts,
Yes.
Councilmember Vogely,
Yes.
Councilmember Bader.
Yes, and my apologies here. I skipped our executive assistant, Deb Williams, for public comment. Deb, back to you. Thanks.
Thank you, Councilmember Bader. We have one written comment provided by Ryan Weber that I have provided to administration, council, and the clerk to be part of the permanent record. And we have no one waiting to speak this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Deb. My apologies for missing you. Do I have any questions on the one proposed action item? This ordinance will be on for third and final reading on November 24th, 2021 at 12:30. If any of my fellow council members have any questions or comments on that, go ahead and speak up. All right, thank you. Okay, well, hearing none then. Items 6 through 8 are also proposed action items and public hearings. These items will be on for action and the public hearing on November 17th, 2021 at 5:30 is when our council meeting will start. And again, they've all been read before, so I'll not read again. Now, obviously, Deb, you mentioned there was no one here to speak in the public hearing, so continue that going forward. Items 9 and 10 are both public hearings, and I will read both proposed ordinances and open the public hearing. Council Bill 2110-38, third and final reading. Adopt the proposed ordinance levying the regular property for the City of Everett for fiscal year commencing January 1st, 2022 on all taxable property, both real and personal, subject to taxation thereon. Then item, the second one, council, let's see here if I'm missing item, my apologies. Here we are, Council Bill 2110-39, third and final reading. Adopt the proposed ordinance levying the EMS property taxes for the City of Everett for fiscal year commencing January 1st, 2022 on all taxable property, both real and personal, subject to taxation thereon. Before I call on the public or council members, I'd like to ask Susie, does staff have any further presentation on either of these 2 items?
Good evening, Councilmember Bader. No, I do not have anything additional, but would be happy to answer any questions.
Okay, thank you, Susie. Before I go to my fellow council members, Deb, we do just confirming we do not have any community members signed up to speak on either of these 2 items?
That is correct. Thank you.
Thank you. Moving on to council members, I'll go down the roll and give them an opportunity. Councilmember Murphy.
No questions or comments. Thank you.
Thanks. Councilmember Roberts.
I have no questions or comments. Thank you.
Thanks. Councilmember Vogely.
Just making sure that the public hearing will stay open until such time that we can actually vote on it with a quorum plus one, if that's what it's called.
That is correct.
Okay, that's all I have then. Thank you.
Thanks. And I have no comments or questions. Okay, again, as I mentioned earlier, due to unforeseen circumstances, we'll leave the public hearing open on items 9 and 10, and these matters will be on November 17th, 2021 at 5:30 for third and final reading and council to take action. Again, that's an early meeting at 5:30. So moving on, items 11 through 14 are also proposed action items, but as these are all first reading, I'll also read each one as well. Item number 11, Council Bill 2111-44, first reading, adopt a proposed ordinance creating a special improvement project entitled Sewer O Utility Upgrades Phase 2, Fund 336, Program 026, with third and final reading scheduled for November 24th, 2021. Council Bill 2111-45, first reading, adopt a proposed ordinance creating a special improvement project entitled Everett Mall Way, 4th Avenue to East Mall Drive Intersection Safety, Fund 303, Program 106, and repealing ordinance number 3596-18, third and final reading also on November 24th, 2021. Council Bill 2111-46, first reading, adopt a proposed ordinance creating a special improvement project entitled 41st Street to Rucker Avenue Corridor, Phase 2, Fund 303, Program 123, third and final reading on November 24th, 2021. Council Bill 2111-47, first reading, adopt a proposed ordinance creating a special improvement project entitled West Marine View Drive and Alverson Boulevard Pedestrian and Bicycle Safety, Fund 303, Program 107, and repealing ordinance number 3464-15, third and final reading on November 24th, 2021. Do I have any questions on any of these proposed action items? We'll go down the roll. Councilmember Murphy?
Well, I guess I had understood these were under the briefing agenda. So have we been briefed on this or received some materials perhaps that I haven't seen yet?
They're in a proposed action. Is there any briefing on any of these tonight?
My understanding is they all have been previously briefed, but
They have not been briefed. Materials are in the packet.
Deb points out the materials are in the packet.
Okay, so the materials are in the packet,
Not briefed.
but they have not been briefed. Is that correct?
no, I believe they've previously been briefed. I don't have any of those dates in front of me, but if the proposed action items are typically have already been briefed. I don't know
Okay.
if Lori's on the call. Maybe Lori has
Okay.
a date or something.
Yeah. If
Yes,
we could-
oh, excuse me, Councilmember Murphy. Yes, I'm looking at the list of proposed actions, and those, are we talking about items 11 through
14.
14? Those actually, we move directly to proposed action. We have been for the last probably year, not briefing all ordinances, but working with Council President Stonecipher on those that are of highest interest to council. So these are first readings, proposed actions, but have not been briefed. Information was sent in the packet.
Okay, yeah, and I recognize that we've done that on some of these items over the past year, but typically, as I recall, we've received like a staff memo or some sort of a written briefing. Now, maybe that is in the packet, and I will go back and look through that later, but I had these down under the briefing agenda, so I assumed we were going to be hearing about them for the first time tonight, but I'll go back and look at it, and I assume my colleagues will as well, and we'll have an opportunity to ask questions at the next couple meetings as well.
And Councilmember Murphy, I'd be happy to work with staff to ensure that there's enough information provided to you, whether it's in the packet or whether there's more information desired. We could send a summary of each of those if that is helpful as well.
Sure, fair enough. Thanks.
And I assume, Lori, if there's enough interest in any of these items, we could get an actual briefing at
Yes.
Okay.
Oh, absolutely. Yes, absolutely.
Okay, thanks very much. Thanks, Councilmember Murphy. Councilmember Roberts.
Thanks, President Bader. I just appreciate the discussion here. I note that all of these items are scheduled for a final reading, I guess, on the 21st.
24th.
I'm sorry, on the 24th. And so that would certainly give everyone some time if there were questions. You know, when I looked at them, they were, I don't want to call them, nothing is routine, but they are public works items or public works improvements items, either of sewer or street nature. So but I just point out that that would give us time to raise questions before the final action is scheduled. So I have no questions about it, but you know, when I looked at them quickly, so that's all I have. Thanks.
Great. Thank you, Councilmember Murphy, or Councilmember Roberts, sorry. Councilmember Vogely.
I am remembering previously when some of these types of items were presented, but didn't really get a briefing that yes, Brian Sass, Director of Public Works, did indeed send us an email saying, hey, this is what we're doing. But I don't think we got that email today or this time. So that might be why the confusion. Thank you. That is all.
All right. Thank you, Councilmember Vogely. Okay, so that is it for items 11 through 14 for tonight, and we'll hear more about those going forward, perhaps. Moving on to the council briefing agenda. These items come before the City Council, serving as a council committee of the whole, and are likely to be scheduled at a future meeting. Council Bill 2111-48, first reading, adopt a proposed ordinance appropriating the budget for the City of Everett for the year 2022 in the amount of $761,494,955, with third and final reading on December 1st, 2021. Susie, presenting, and then after that's done, I'll turn it over to Councilmember Murphy as chair of the Budget Committee.
Thank you very much. So my ordinance briefing is actually going to be done as part of the budget hearing. And so if that is acceptable, we can proceed with Councilmember Murphy.
Councilmember Murphy, if you want to open the budget hearing, go.
Sure. I thought you did a great job opening it, Councilmember Bader, but yes, we'll open the public hearing. This is obviously the first meeting in our 2022 budget hearings. There will be 3 meetings over the next several weeks that we'll discuss this, and the goal is to try to have our 2022 budget approved by early December. And so with that, Susie, I will turn it over to you for the presentation.
Hey, well, thank you very much. And if you'll bear with me while I share my screen, and it looks like that is working. So with that, we will begin. So thank you very much. And as noted, tonight is our first budget hearing, and we'll begin with a high-level review of the proposed 2022 citywide expenditure budget and the citywide staffing budget. Then we'll go through the year-over-year budget comparisons for most operating funds and a few of the non-operating funds that had significant changes. Please stop me as we move through the slides if you have any questions. Department heads are also here to assist in providing responses. We have 2 additional budget hearings scheduled for November 17th and December 1st, and we'll bring back department heads to address follow-up questions as needed. So before we get started, I'd like to orient you to the basis for the budget comparisons that I'll be providing. As in prior years, we're highlighting the difference between the 2021 original budget and the 2022 proposed budget. We use the 2021 original budget as the basis rather than the amended budget because the amended budget contains significant amounts in reappropriations and carry forward that tend to distort the year-over-year comparison. Therefore, all of the amendments that have been adopted this year that carry forward to 2022 will appear as increases in 2022. The slide compares the 2021 original citywide expenditure budget to the 2022 proposed budget. The total expenditure budget for 2022 is $446.5 million, exclusive of ending fund balances. The budget ordinance that you'll be considering concurrent with the budget hearings includes budgeted ending fund balances in the amount of $315 million, which brings the total proposed budget amount to $761.5 million. We exclude ending fund balances from this presentation because departments are not authorized to spend it without coming back to council for approval. Therefore, the amounts in this slide better represent the actual expenditure authority you are considering for the 2022 proposed budget. Going to the bottom line, the citywide budget increases by $34.9 million or 8.5% in 2022. The largest dollar increase is in the general government funds and is due in large part to a substantial increase in left one pension and other reserve contributions. I'll go over these changes as we move through the fund budgets. The slide presents an overall picture of the labor budget in regular full-time equivalents or FTEs. Staffing was cut back severely in 2020 and 2021 in response to the pandemic's impact on city resources. After much review and consideration of the operational and community impacts resulting from these reductions, selected positions have been added back or in some cases are new to the budget. The 2022 proposed budget includes 1,173.75 FTEs citywide, an increase of 32.45 FTEs over the 2021 original budget. The increase includes 21.25 FTEs within the general government and 11.2 in non-general government funds. I'll go over the details of the position changes in the fund by fund reviews, starting with general government funds. First, to orient you to the layout, each slide for operating funds contains a list of proposed 2022 budget changes that are $25,000 or more on the left. And on the right will be a table comparing the 2021 original expenditure budget with the proposed 2022 budget, followed by a table comparing budgeted positions. Items that I will not be reviewing include M&O changes below $25,000, the across-the-board 2% M&O increase that each general government fund received, and labor cost changes relating to cost of living adjustments, step increases, and benefits which are common to all departments. So starting with Council Fund 001, you can see that the 2022 proposed budget increases by $51,000 or 8.5% from the 2021 original budget, and that there were no changes in FTEs. The primary reason for the budget increase is the restoration of the one-time $25,000 reduction in the council's contingency that was included in last year's budget. The total council contingency for 2022 is now back to $75,000. Moving on to legal, Fund 003, we show an increase of $167,940 or 3.8%, which is due primarily to the addition of an Assistant City Attorney 1 position. The increase in capacity will allow one of our Assistant City Attorney 2 positions to serve as a dedicated advisor to the police department to help them navigate the new laws passed by the legislature earlier this year. Administration Fund 004's budget is proposed to increase by $59,800, which is largely the result of a net staffing increase of 0.6 FTE. There are 2 staffing changes for administration in the proposed budget, including the reallocation of 0.4 of the Special Projects Manager to Community Planning and Economic Development to provide support for the neighborhood organizations and manage the city's boards and commissions membership. And then we also have the backfill of the administrative assistant position that had been eliminated during the last VSP program. With the reassignment of the special projects manager, the backfill is necessary to provide administrative support for daily operations and to respond to resident concerns. In Human Resources, Fund 007, we have the addition of an administrative assistant and an HR assistant, which accounts for the majority of the $239,000 or 13.8% increase. These positions provide much needed support for recruitment, the administration of new state paid leave programs, and general benefit support. The administrative assistant position was added to the 2021 budget in budget amendment number 1. Next, we have the general government's non-departmental Fund 009. The purpose of this fund is to account for expenditures that do not directly tie to the function of just one department or that involve multiple departments. It also pays for general government utilities. As shown, Fund 009's 2022 budget increases by $13.2 million or 58.1% over the 2021 budget. Significant changes include a $7.6 million contribution to the Police and Fire Left One Pension Fund. This amount is the combination of the 2022 actuarially recommended contribution amount of $4.8 million, plus the balance of the 2021 contribution that was not made this year, which is $2.8 million. This puts us back on track for full funding by 2030, according to the current actuarial study. Next, the jail budget was reduced by $2.9 million, as discussed at previous council meeting. The labor contingency budget is increasing by a net $443,000. This amount is the combined impact of the elimination of the unrealized labor concession set aside that was included in the 2021 budget, the addition of a set aside for an open labor contract, and an increase to the labor under expenditure estimate. As you recall, we increased the assumption for a number of positions expected to be vacant at any point in time by 7, from 28 positions to 35. The last item on this slide is an increase to the Snow 911 annual assessment of $133,700 or 4.9%. Continuing with Fund 009, there are several increases to General Government Reserve Fund contributions, the largest being a $4.7 million increase to CIP1. The contribution increases to the technology, motor vehicle, insurance, and facility maintenance reserves are necessary to accommodate additional funding needs and maintain reserve targets. As you may recall, we reviewed many of the reserve funds at the June council meeting and provided a copy of the cash flow models for each reserve fund via email. So if you would like an updated review, I will bring back additional detail at the next budget hearing. And the last slide for Fund 09 budget changes includes the elimination of $125,000 for the police operations study that was included in the 2021 budget. The work is actually just getting underway, and so we will be bringing forward a reappropriation request for the unspent funding in the first budget amendment of 2022. We have the addition of $408,700 to fund the senior center management contract. This is the net of the 2022 contract payment to Volunteers of America in the amount of $450,000 and a reduction of $41,000 in senior center utility costs, which will now be paid directly by VOA. We also have the addition of $100,000 for an Indigenous land acknowledgement project to be commissioned next year. And finally, we have a $150,000 increase in flexible funding to help the COET team respond immediately to urgent homelessness issues such as transportation, clothing, temporary motel stays, rental deposits, much needed medical equipment like wheelchairs or walkers, meals, etc. This flexible funding is separate from and in addition to the Safe Streets Flex Fund donation account in our Criminal Justice Fund 156. It's also in addition to staffing increases provided in Budget Amendment number 3 of this year, ongoing provisions in human needs grants, ongoing financial support for Claire's Place, funding for the pallet shelter expansion, and significant investments to increase shelter capacity and services using grants from Snohomish County, as well as programs and projects that will be proposed from ARPA funding. The funding may also be used for supplemental contractor support for encampment cleanups. Moving on to finance, Fund 010, changes contributing to the budget increase of $275,000 include the addition of a financial analyst position provided in Budget Amendment number 1 of this year, and one-time funding for the estimate retirement payout of our city clerk and costs associated with crossover staffing and temporary help. The budget for information technology increases by $305,000 or 11% for 2022. Changes include the restoration of an information technology manager position, which had been eliminated in the first VSP program. This position was also provided in Budget Amendment number 1. And an increase in the overtime budget of $26,000 based on recent trends in departmental needs. Next is the Community Planning and Economic Development Fund with a net increase of 4.9 FTEs and expenditure budget increase of $711,000 or 25.4%. 3 positions are being added to the Planning Division, which has been struggling with a shortage of permit staff capacity to keep up with current demand. Additions include an associate planner, administrative assistant, and an assistant planner. The associate planner was added in Budget Amendment number 1 of this year. A project coordinator is added to the Community Development Division to help implement strategies to reduce homelessness in Everett. This position was identified in Budget Amendment number 3. And point 4 of the Special Projects Manager is being transferred from administration, as previously noted, to the Community Development Division to provide neighborhood coordination and support. Also in Community Planning and Economic Development, we have point 3 of the Community Development Specialist and point 2 of the Housing and Community Development Manager being reclassed from CDBG fund to allow the fund to stay within administrative overhead limits. And finally, there is an increase of $36,600 for position upgrades. Fund 024 is the Engineering and Public Services Department. The expenditure budget is increasing by $367,000 or 5.1%, which includes the addition of a permit development counter technician and an associate engineer PE to improve construction permit turnaround time. Both positions were added in Budget Amendment number 1. Animal Services Fund 026 budget is proposed to increase by $63,400 or 3.6%. This includes the addition of a 0.2 FTE veterinary technician and a 0.1 FTE increase in seasonal labor, both of which will support the expansion of the low-income veterinary service program. The goal of this new program is to increase shelter revenues and reduce the surrender rates for pets experiencing health issues. Police Fund 031's expenditure budget is increasing by $1.6 million or 4.1% in 2022. This includes the addition of one police sergeant position and an increase in differential pay of $207,000. The sergeant position was added in budget amendment number 1 and is partially funded by the COPS grant. Differential pay includes estimated sick and vacation leave buyouts, as well as funds for acting appointments. The budgeted number of retirement separations for 22 is 19, an increase from 2021's budget of 16. Fire Fund 032's budget remains flat because the city is currently in negotiations with the fire union. Therefore, there is no cost of living adjustment included for IAFF employees. The COLA will be added once a contract is approved. As shown on the slide, differential pay is decreasing by $109,000. As with police, differential pay includes an estimated amount for retirement or separation bank buyouts. In fire, differential pay also includes a variety of premium pay, education and education incentives not yet included in salaries. Next, we have Facilities Fund 038 with an increase in the expenditure budget of $169,000 and a net increase in FTEs of 0.5. Position changes include an exchange of an electrician and a supervisor 2 for a maintenance mechanic and a custodial supervisor through a reorganization of department needs. The budget also includes the addition of a resource conservation manager. This position is split 50-50 with parks and adds much needed capacity to the project management team that maintains our facilities. It will also help us stretch our limited resources further by identifying and implementing cost-saving measures that increase efficiencies in our buildings, while at the same time lower carbon pollution and promote environmentally friendly operations. The parks budget has an increase of $475,000 or 7.2%. This includes an increase in regular FTEs of 1.8, an increase of seasonal FTEs of 1.7. Staffing changes include the addition of a park ranger 2 to restore one of the positions eliminated in the 2020 budget reduction. The position will allow for better park coverage throughout the year. It will also help reduce overtime and provide coverage to support community events like Sorticulture and 4th of July. We also see the other half of the resource conservation manager mentioned on the previous slide, which will be split with facilities. And we have a reclass of 0.3 golf athletic supervisor from golf to parks. Park seasonal labor changes include increasing the budget by $69,000 to support the Jetty Island program and adding a student day labor to provide website and social media support. The proposed budget also includes adding back the preschool program. Library Fund 110's expenditure budget includes an increase of 2.3 regular FTEs and a reduction of 0.6 seasonal FTEs. A 0.6 youth services assistant was added in mid-2021 as the library was able to begin to restore service and open to the public. Two formerly part-time positions, a youth services librarian and circulation position, were increased to full-time, which is in line with the library's 2020-2021 comprehensive reorganization. The 2022 budget proposes the addition of a fundraising coordinator. Based on the success of the new fundraiser at Animal Shelter, we believe that a dedicated fundraiser for the library will be able to increase the library's resources and help support service levels going forward. The 2022 budget also eliminates the temporary 2021 set-aside, which was added during last year's budget hearings to cover potential costs associated with being able to reopen. There is a substantial reduction in the annual debt service requirements for the conference center based on the bond amortization schedule. We will see continuing reduction in annual debt service requirements until the bonds are paid off in 2026. Changes to the Streets Fund 120 budget include the elimination of a utility laborer and addition of a heavy equipment operator to better meet the workload needs of the department. This exchange resulted in a net increase in labor costs of approximately $26,000. The department is also adding a 3-person cleanup crew to help address encampment and other street-related cleanup issues throughout the city, which was addressed in Budget Amendment number 3 of this year. And with that, that wraps up our look at general government funds. But before I move on from the general government, I don't have a slide on Municipal Arts Fund 112 because the changes were less than $25,000. But I do want to note that Sorticulture, the 4th of July Festival, and cultural arts grants are all included in the proposed Fund 112 budget. And at that point, Council Member Murphy, if you would like to take a break and see if there are any questions before I move on to non-general government funds.
Yes, that would be great, Susie. Thank you very much.
Sure.
I'll just go down the line and let the council members ask questions or make comments, starting off with Council Member Roberts.
Thank you, Councilmember Murphy. I don't have any questions. I just need to say how much I appreciate Susie walking us through the detail and the changes in each of these funds. It's very helpful to follow that. So nothing further. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Councilmember Roberts. Councilmember Vogely.
I would also like to say thank you very much. And I just would like to be reminded what budget amendment it was, so I can go back and look at the slides for the police sergeant. You said it, but I didn't get to write it down.
That was budget amendment number 1 of this year.
Okay. And I also just want to say that Susie has been instrumental in my understanding of the budget and how every single little itty bitty thing works. And I have been racking her brains and she has been filling mine. So I'm sure I will ask some more public questions in the future, but right now I will just listen to all of this information. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you, Councilmember Vogely. Moving on to Councilmember Bader.
Thanks, Councilmember Murphy. 2 questions, Susie. One, maybe more comment related to the library. At least from what I can tell, looks like our budget for the library is running the same as it was last year, and maybe even more than it was pre-pandemic. I'm not sure about that though, 2020, I guess. Yet we're still running a library with about 25% less hours open to the public than it was before. I just want to say I'm concerned about that, that we're not getting the money's worth that we're putting in there. I don't want to cut the library budget. I would prefer them to be open more hours. On the other hand, just for me, I'd say that, you know, if we're not going to get the hours we thought that we were going to get back to kind of full operation like so many other city departments have been, I'm just a little concerned about continuing that funding at that level. The second comment I had was, and I'm not sure if it will be allocated or not actually in the budget, but 4th of July parade, is that something that ends up with a line item? And if it is it allocated, or where are we at on that?
We have the 4th of July festival funded, but not the parade.
Gotcha. Okay. Anyhow, for me, that'd be something I'd like to see us bring back, but that's just my comments. So
can I ask Abby Cooley to comment on library hours briefly?
Sure. Yeah, we are looking to expand our hours in January. We are currently working with our AFSCME partners on working together to find a schedule that will work with staff and our staffing levels. Our budget is below what we were pre-pandemic. I think it's still about $500,000 below And that reduction was mainly in staff. So we are at lower levels than we were before.
Thanks, Abby. I hope my comments might be helpful to encouraging back to full hours. I recognize there's a drop, but I think there's about a 25% drop in hours, but not in expenses. So anyway,
Yes.
just hope that might help us get things back open again. Thank you.
Yep. And I can just say we were pre-pandemic, we were open 114 hours a week between both locations. We're currently open 80 hours per week at both locations. And in January, we are looking to move towards between 100 and 108 hours per week at seven days a week.
Thank you. Councilor Murphy, that's all I had. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Bader. I had a couple of comments and a couple of questions. First of all, really happy to see the reinstatement of the Left One funding. As we all know, that's been an area of concern over the last few years, and getting that back on track for full funding by 2030 is really a great accomplishment. So I'm glad to see that. Also glad to see the reinstatement of some of those planning department personnel. I know that as we made the cuts during the pandemic, that was an area that was cut. And that's one of the areas that I heard a lot of complaints about over the last 18 months or so, was just the length of time it was taking to get plans and permits through. And so hopefully getting those positions reinstated will be a big plus for improving that customer service for our community. Also really glad to hear about those quality of life expenditures for horticulture and Jetty Island and the 4th of July. I know we had a lot of robust, I'll say, discussions last year during the budget cycle. So it's nice to have that back in and staying status quo. I think the questions I had, there's two questions I had, Susie, on the items you went through. And one was to do with the neighborhood coordinator. Just want to make sure I understand that. It sounded like it was a shift, more of a transfer, but are we actually increasing the commitment to the neighborhood coordination? I know that's one of the areas when I go out to neighborhood meetings, and I know my colleagues have probably heard this as well, that a lot of the neighborhood leaders and neighborhood groups really miss that full-time resource that we used to have with Wendy. And so can you just talk a little bit further about if that's just a transfer or a shift of dollars, or is there actually an increasing commitment? And if so, what will be the focus for that position?
Susie, if you don't mind, I can speak up and you can fill in the gaps as far as the exact amount of hours. This is Mayor Franklin. It is an increase. We had fully eliminated that position during one of the voluntary separation to reduce expenses. And it's not putting a full-time staff member back in, but I think it's putting like 0.6 staff member back in so that the neighborhoods will have a lot of focused attention, and the rest of that staff member's time will be focused on our boards and commissions, which is also kind of a community engagement. So my hope is that we'll see a lot more just a lot more support for community engagement, both for our neighborhoods and our boards and commissioners and other volunteers throughout the city. And Susie, if you have anything to add, go for it.
No, I have nothing to add.
That's great, Mayor. I appreciate that. I think that will really be appreciated by our community members and neighborhood leaders in particular. And then the last, I guess, comment or question I had, we all were appreciative and applauded the police department and Chief Templeman in particular when the COPS grant was obtained, I think about a year ago, a little over a year ago. And as I recall, that allowed for federal government subsidy of the hiring of up to 16 officers. And I know we did approve the hiring of the one sergeant earlier this year in that first budget amendment, and that was funded under the COPS grant. So that leaves 15 positions in police, and I was a little surprised not to see some progress made there. I've been talking a little bit to the chief and Deputy Mayor Harper in the last couple of days on this topic, and I'd like to see us consider at least making some progress towards utilization of the COPS grant funding in our 2022 budget. And so hopefully we can discuss that a little bit further over the next couple of budget meetings between now and the 1st of December in terms of what that staffing, incremental staffing might look like. And with that, I think that's all I had at this point. So Susie, do you want to go into the next portion of this slide deck?
Absolutely. Now, as that concludes our general government, we have kicking off the non-general government funds. We have the motor vehicle equipment and replacement fund with a budget increase of $2.6 million. The largest driver of this increase is the replacement of a fire ladder truck at a cost of approximately $1.6 million. Also of note, police will be replacing a total of 15 vehicles, 9 of which are patrol utility vehicles, and council authorized MVD to begin the purchase of 9 of the patrol vehicles at the November 3rd council meeting due to this extremely long lead times caused by the supply chain issues that are everywhere around us. Moving on to the lodging tax fund, we have a decrease of $30,000 for a total expenditure budget of $420,000. This follows the agreed upon plan to limit the annual appropriation to the estimated available fund balance from the prior year. Recall that we ended up overcommitting funds in 2020 as a result of the pandemic shock on revenues. This process will allow us to avoid that happening in the future. Lodging tax allocations include $150,000 for tourism promotion, $170,000 for grants, and $100,000 to the event center for debt support. The Real Property Fund consolidates financial transactions related to general government real property. Fund 145 has 2 separate subfunds, one for real property acquisition and the other for street and alley vacation funded capital projects. The 2022 proposed budget of $163,000 shown in the box on the right of the slide is the budget for the real property acquisition subfund. There are no expenditures budgeted yet for the street and alley vacation fund. However, 2 ordinances were passed in 2020 with a total expenditure budget of $1.3 million for street and alley vacation funded capital projects. Those ordinances covered the projects listed in the completed and approved sections of the table shown above. $555,000 of this amount was actually spent in 2020, with the balance reappropriated this year. Funds for projects not complete by the end of 2021 will be reappropriated to 2022 in the first budget amendment. The projects listed on the recommended section will be brought to council for consideration through plans and systems ordinances before being added to the Fund 145 budget. And now I'd like to hand it off to Tom Hood to provide a brief description of the recommended projects for next year. Tom?
Great, thank you, Susie. Good evening, everyone. Tom Hood, Public Works. Before I get into these recommended project list, I'd like to quickly review the criteria that we're using to select and prioritize projects using the right-of-way vacation funds. The council resolution passed in 2019 gave us some pretty clear guidelines. Those include striving for a balance between transportation and open space projects, prioritizing transportation projects that provide access to open spaces, also looking for a balanced geographic distribution of projects within the city, and then also leveraging those projects that are identified in the city's transportation improvement plan or the Parks and Rec open space plan. So on top of those guidelines, Public Works also looks for projects that address known safety issues, improves access to parks or schools, and improves ADA accessibility and mobility. So with that as a backdrop, we present this list of recommended projects that I'll run through with brief descriptions now. Loganberry Lane path improvements, that's actually a parks project. The goal there is to provide a natural connection between two popular parks, the Loganberry Dog Park and Cache Park. That'll be accomplished by way of prescribed natural paths and boardwalks, including ADA accessible routes and wayfinding signage. Currently, the planning is conceptual, pending further design and study of that area. The West Marine View Drive, Alverson Boulevard Ped and Bike Safety Project. That's an existing project that we are looking to inject 75,000 Fund 145 into for upgrade and extension of the existing gravel path through the High Bulb area of the Legion Park Outlook. The existing gravel path only cuts through about half of that, and we'll be extending it and also paving it in asphalt for upgrades to that High Bulb area. East Marine View Drive, we actually have two projects proposed on that. The first one is the pedestrian crossing at Summit. That is at Jackson Park, and we have a pretty high crossing demand there between Jackson Park and the multi-use path on the north side of East Marine View Drive. So those improvements would involve the installation of the rectangular rapid flashing beacon crosswalk, the RRFB as we call it, as well as marking that crosswalk signage and ADA ramp upgrades. Also on East Marine View Drive up at 10th, which is adjacent or in front of the Assisted Living Center. We also have a very high pedestrian demand for crossings there. We'd also install an RRFB crossing there with similar amenities. Then moving on, 79th Place at Evergreen Middle School. This is an existing crosswalk that's that needs enhancements. It's come on the school's radar in the last year or so, and so we would be upgrading ADA ramps there, also installing the RRFB flasher and improving the markings on that crosswalk. We've seen quite an uptick in school children needing to cross there to get to Evergreen Middle School in the past year or so. Then we have the 110th Street crosswalk enhancements at Monroe Elementary. A similar situation. We have a crosswalk that's very old and needs upgrade to current standards, serving a large neighborhood to the south that crosses 110th to get to Monroe Elementary School. So that one is on our list as well. And then finally, we have the Severs-Ducey Boulevard pedestrian crossing. This is at the Johnson Ball Fields. We have, as you probably know, significant demand for crossing when events are held at the Johnson Ball Fields. We get a lot of parking on the north side of Severs-Ducey, and we would be proposing another RRFB crossing with associated curb ramps, signage, and markings. So that's the proposed list. I'm certainly happy to field any questions you may have.
Tom, thank you very much. I appreciate you bringing this overview forward on the recommended projects, and I know there'll be more coming later, but there may be questions. I'll just go down the line and see if any council members currently have any questions or comments at this point. Council Member Roberts.
So I really appreciate, Tom, you're walking us through this because I think it's important not only that we as council members, but that the public understand that there is an approach that looks at these needs and applies these funds accordingly. There's a lot of discussion about sidewalks or improvements or and so on. And I think it's just important to see that this is something that's being looked at citywide, and then recommendations made for expenditures on that basis. So, and I also know there's a lot that goes into safety issues insofar as streets are concerned with respect to schools. And that's a major priority for funding for both state and federal funds for these projects as well. So just, I really appreciate your walking us through that. I don't have any questions beyond that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Roberts. Councilmember Vogely?
I'm going to preface this by saying I have not thought out my words just yet, but looking at the recommended projects and the estimated amount and the fact that cars and people driving them have been increasing their speeds and disruption, for lack of a better word. Just curious about the future, not necessarily this budget, but future budgets, and how numbers like that might go towards actually calming traffic, right? Because crosswalks are fantastic, but they're lines painted on a road. Okay, maybe they're not painted. They have very special reflective thick stuff, but essentially it doesn't slow anybody down, nor do lights. You have to actually be aware and then actually follow the rules. So I just wanted to mention that. But I do very much like that all of these things are being brought forward to be improved. So yeah, that's all. Just thinking of the future.
Good, thanks, Councilmember Vogely. Councilmember Bader, any questions or comments?
Just comments, exciting list of projects. It'd be great to see these go forward. Just one side comment here on that 110th Street Monroe Elementary. I think it's important work to do. Glad we're doing it, but I'd point out that I think most of that pedestrian traffic is coming from county property that's residents within the county. And I think that speaks to the need for us, again, to take a look at annexation, or I'm not sure how the county's sharing in this themselves, but I think most of that area is county there. So, but glad it's on the list. Thanks.
Thank you, Councilmember Bader. Tom, and thanks again for this overview. You know, the one thing that occurs to me that might be interesting to look at, and as we look at this slide, there's kind of this open space in the lower right-hand corner. You know, if we look back at the completed and approved projects, as well as the recommended projects moving forward, I think it might be very interesting as the city has moved to a district model to footnote each one of these projects with the district number, maybe parenthetically to the right side of the project description, and then maybe do a subtotal in the lower right-hand corner that would show District 1 through 5, the funding, so that we can get a really good idea of how the dollars are being spread out throughout the various parts of the city, and make sure that there's, you know, some equitable spread of the dollars throughout the city. So not something for tonight necessarily, but would certainly be interested in seeing an updated version of this slide with the kind of the subtotals in the lower right-hand corner, District 1 through 5. And I know future city council will probably be very interested in that sort of a slicing and dicing of this sort of a project list. But again, thank you very much.
Thank you.
And with that, we'll move back to Susie.
Okay. Thank you very much. And our next slide is EMS Fund 153. It has an increase of just $152,000 or 1%. A placeholder for the IAFF contract is included in the budget. Offsetting this is a reduction in overtime to bring it closer to current trends. The General Government Special Projects Fund 155 was created in 2019 as a place to account for projects and programs that are primarily funded by restricted revenues and are not a good fit with other existing special revenue funds. The 2022 budget is listed in this slide by program. The increase is due to the new pallet shelter program, which was not funded in the original 2021 budget. There are 3 new projects budgeted in Criminal Justice Fund 156 for next year. All police mobile data computers are expected to be replaced in 2022 at a cost of approximately $550,000. There is a $545,000 project budgeted for bullet trap replacement at the police firing range. And we have $220,000 budgeted for the BolaWrap program if the current pilot project is successful. These devices meet the new state requirements to use less lethal tactics to apprehend non-compliant subjects when possible. Funding for the BolaWrap program will be from a one-time distribution from the State City Assistance Fund. The city received $452,000 earlier this year. The state funds are to be used to assist with the new law enforcement and criminal justice related legislation. The BolaWrap program fits within these parameters. The ongoing cost of the program, about $30,000, will be paid out of these funds until they are exhausted. And at that time, if the decision is made to continue the program, ongoing costs will move to the general fund. The 2022 budgeted traffic mitigation funds will be used for the Edgewater Bridge replacement project and the Everett Mall Way intersection project. $400,000 is proposed to be budgeted in the Affordable and Supportive Housing Fund for pallet shelter expansion, site development, and initial operations. The funding source is a new special state sales tax allocation that was enacted through HB 1406. This funding source is restricted to affordable and supportive housing. Moving on to Community Development Block Grant Fund, we see the other side of the reclass of the staff to the CPED fund for a reduction in Fund 198 of 0.5 FTEs. The other significant budget change in CDBG is an increase in operating grants of $255,000 for 2022. Utilities Fund 401's budget is proposed to increase just over 6.2 million or 4%. Changes include the addition of a source control specialist. The Western Washington Phase 2 municipal stormwater permit has a new requirement to implement a source control business program no later than January 1st, 2023. This new position will develop the program prior to engaging businesses and provide ongoing program administration. The position will be hired probably around mid-year of 2022. The department is also adding a half FTE day laborer to support the surface water group's inventory and assessment of fish barriers. Overtime is budgeted to increase by $174,000 to restore to pre-COVID levels. Intergovernmental payments are going up $777,000, primarily due to a cost-sharing agreement with PUD for maintenance of mutually beneficial PUD assets in the watershed. Interfund insurance is increasing by $753,000, and our property tax insurance premium renewals have come in or are anticipated actually to come in extremely high this year. And the transfer out to the Utilities Construction Fund is going up $5.7 million due to the bond issue that is planned for next year. We're reducing the excise tax budget by nearly $700,000 due to favorable tax rule changes relative to sewer charges. Debt service is $402,000 lower, which is in line with the existing bond amortization schedule. And professional services, equipment, and miscellaneous expenditures are all decreasing by a combined $2.1 million due to lower anticipated needs next year. Transit Fund 425's budget is proposed to increase by 4.1 million or 14.7%. Significant changes include the addition of 10 bus operator positions, allowing transit to restore about 11,000 annual service hours. With this addition, service will be at 90% of pre-pandemic levels. We have the restoration of a transportation program manager position to support grant management, an increase in overtime of 305,000 to address absenteeism issues faced by transit during the course of the pandemic. On average, transit has 12 unscheduled absentees approximately per day. We have a $975,000 increase in transit's payment in lieu of tax or pilot due to the large increase in transit's operations grant funding. And we have a $1.2 million increase in capital outlay to fund the new electric bus charging station and improvements to Everett Station's Great Hall. With the reclass of 0.3 FTEs out of golf to parks and a reduction in seasonal pay of 27,000, golf's budget will increase by just 51,800 or 1.1% for 2022. The 2022 motor vehicle department budget is proposed to decrease by just over $1.1 million or 14.1%. Significant changes include a $43,000 increase in differential pay for those employees working the swing shift. The increase incorporates the full change in differential pay provided in the AFSCME contract. We have a $600,000 decrease in the fuel budget due to the introduction of more electric vehicles and other more fuel efficient vehicles to the fleet. We have also seen a reduction in miles driven that has reduced fuel consumption. There's a $300,000 reduction in the parts budget due to lower vehicle usage and an overestimate in the prior year. And the general M&O budget is lower by $240,800 based on lower overall experience in the last couple of years. And the last fund of the night, the Self-Insurance Fund 503. This fund accounts for the city's self-insured programs, including workers' compensation, insurance premiums, unemployment compensation, tort liability, and the callback dam. The 2022 proposed budget increases by a total of $1,167,400 or 12.7%. The majority of the increase is in the insurance premium category. We are in what's called a hard market with commercial insurance rates at an all-time high. Reasons for this include the weather climate disasters nationwide with losses in the billions of dollars, aging infrastructure, liability resulting from COVID-19, law enforcement actions, and rising costs of litigation. At this point, the premiums are just an estimate. However, we will not have our actual renewal numbers until late December. And unfortunately, we just learned that Bellingham's renewals came in higher than our budget estimate. So even this large increase that we have in the budget may not cover it. And if that's the case, we'll bring back in a budget amendment after the first of the year. The insurance premiums budget increase is partially offset by a reduction in the workers' comp budget of $240,000 and a reduction in the unemployment compensation budget of $83,000 based on improved performance in those areas. And that concludes the information I've prepared for tonight, and turn it back over to Councilmember Murphy.
Thank you, Susie. We'll go down the line again and see if these most recent slides have generated any additional questions or comments from the council members. Councilmember Roberts.
I do not have questions or comments at this point, but again, appreciate the detail that has been brought forward by Susie and the staff. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Councilmember Roberts. Councilmember Vogely.
Yes, thank you. I'm wondering if Chief Templeman is still on, because I was just reading about the BOLA wrap. Somehow I didn't wrap my head around that one. And Yeah, so is he here to talk about that a little bit? And if not, maybe I could ask again next week.
I see Chief Templeman. He's here.
I am here. Good evening, council members. The bowl wrap project is one that we are piloting. We are hoping here in the next couple of weeks to get the first 10 bowl wraps out in patrol that we actually acquired through a different grant. But this is just another less than lethal tool. This is a device that allows officers to maintain what we call standoff distance, which is a safe distance from an individual that may be, for example, armed with a knife or in some sort of a crisis and maybe armed with some sort of a weapon other than a firearm, in which we are able to deploy a Kevlar cable, if you will, at high speeds that wraps around the individual's arms or torso area and allows us to secure their arms quickly and then have an arrest team come in and safely take a person into custody without, for example, using a firearm or using other higher levels of physical force. So it is a device that is not widely used here in the state of Washington yet, but I believe with some of the new use of force legislation that has passed and the focus on providing officers with other tools that allow us to safely take people into custody with a minimal amount of force, that this will be a device or a tool that we'll see more often here in Washington state. And we look forward to piloting it here in the next couple of weeks.
Thank you. And I imagine you're going to be making sure it's not used on pregnant women, elderly people, and kids under 12.
Yeah, we have a policy that that we have in place, and it does have some restrictions on certain types of populations where we would not want to use a device like this. But I will say, that when given the option between using a firearm, or lethal force, or using a device like this, we're going to tend to lean towards being, exercising a wide range of discretion in using this tool versus other more damaging or lethal tools.
Thank you. I appreciate your information. That's all. One more thing. The firing range project. I am wondering if you have considered, by you meaning whoever would consider it, partnering with the United States Coast Guard and letting them possibly use our facility, and maybe they would have financial stuff to help out with that, because they usually have to go up to Jim Creek.
Yeah, we have not specifically obviously considered that partnership, but we have been approached by other organizations that have had interest in using the firing range. We've always been pretty restrictive on it because we have a difficult enough time just getting our 200 or so officers through for their quarterly qualifications and some of our regional SWAT trainings and whatnot. But in addition to that too, we really try as much as we can to limit the use of that range just due to the neighborhood and some of the noise concerns that have been raised there. So we've really tried to be pretty conservative in our partnerships outside of our own agency because of that.
Thank you. That's really all.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Vogely and Chief Templeman. Councilmember Bader, any questions or comments?
Not really. Thanks, Susie. Great information, very informative, and obviously just dismaying the whole insurance-related increases we have to deal with, but I guess that's the world we live in. So anyhow, thanks again for a very informative presentation.
Thank you. Thank you, Councilmember Bader. And Susie, I have no further questions at this point, but again, just want to say thank you to you and the staff. You do such a nice job of putting this all into really nice, easy to understand PowerPoints, but I know there is a lot of detail behind this. There are literally hundreds of hours put into this, not only by your staff, but across all the departments, by all the folks handling the detailed budgets across the city. And so just really want to applaud and thank you for all your hard work on this budget. And I know we have 2 more budget sessions to talk through this. Since this is a public hearing, I know we do want to make sure we give the public the opportunity to weigh in or make comments. And I don't know that we have any public on right now. Deb, maybe you can confirm that, but certainly we'll leave this budget hearing open for public comment as we move forward. Deb, do we have anyone online to comment on our budget so far?
No, we do not. Councilmember Murphy, thank you.
Okay, thanks, Deb. Much appreciated. Again, we'll have a follow-up on this next week. So if council members have other questions that come to mind, or as you're going through the detailed information in your budget books, your binders, make note of that, and we'll talk about it next week. So with that, I'm going to hand it back over to Councilmember Bader. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Councilmember Murphy. And as noted at the start of the meeting and provided on the screen now, you may contact Deb Williams in the council office for instructions on watching, listening, or participating in our weekly meeting. She can be reached by phone at 425-257-8703 or by email at dwilliams@everettwa.gov. Again, and note that we will be beginning at 5:30 next week, not 6:30. And with no further business, we are adjourned.